Thank you all for joining us today for our Whiteshell WR-1 Reactor Decommissioning Environmental Impact Statement Updates webinar. This is our second webinar of the day. We do these webinars bi-monthly. First off, I'd like to acknowledge that Whiteshell Laboratories is situated on the traditional lands of Treaties 1 and 3 and near Treaty 5. This land is the home of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. We recognize that many other Indigenous peoples across the region in Canada also consider this area their home. CNL is deeply grateful for the opportunity to work on these lands and waterways, which hold significant cultural and historical importance. We acknowledge that this site was established without consultation with the Indigenous peoples of this area. We recognize the ongoing impact of this, and we are committed to understanding and respecting the unique Indigenous history, rights, and title associated with this land. So before we kick off the webinar, a few logistical things to note. First, we offer simultaneous interpretation. You can access this session in French and English through the globe icon on the bottom right on the bar on Zoom. Please select the language you'd like to hear. Today's session is planned for about 45 minutes. We anticipate the presentation will take around 20 to 25, and the rest will be time for questions. Please use the Q&A icon to submit your questions at any point during the presentation, and we'll respond at the end. We are recording today's session because we like to post on our YouTube channel afterwards, and then we send the link out to all the attendees with answers to questions we either need to get more information on or we don't get to at the end. If you're experiencing any technical issues, please email wlcommunications@cnl.ca. Our team will be watching the inbox and we'll try to get you sorted out. We're also looking to evaluate our webinars more in depth. So following the webinar today, you'll receive an email with a link to complete a quick 10-question survey. We'd really appreciate it if you take the time to share your thoughts on our webinars. So today you'll be hearing from Jeff Miller. He's the manager of regulatory approval for the WR-1 decommissioning project at Whiteshell. Jeff will be providing us with an overview of the most recent updates to the EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, for the WR-1 decommissioning. After the presentation, we'll open it up for Q&A. So Jeff, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mike. Welcome. Thank you all for taking the time to come and hear about our recent progress on the WR-1 in situ decommissioning project. Again, my name is Jeff Miller. Today I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues, Uzair Wasif and Nikki Cure. I am the manager of regulatory approval for WR-1 for the WR-1 in situ decommissioning project. And I've been working with Whiteshell for about 17 years now in a few different positions, but I've been with the WR-1 project for about 10 years now. I am a nuclear engineer by trade, proud husband and father, volunteer, and a Star Trek nerd. So let me know through the Q&A session today when you see the hidden Star Trek reference in today's presentation. Now, as always, we'll start out with a little bit of background information for those of you who may be joining us for the first time. And then we'll get into an update on the revisions that were made to the Environmental Impact Statement, or the EIS, in our most recent submission in January of this year. Whiteshell Laboratories was constructed starting in about 1962 and was centered around Whiteshell Reactor number 1, WR-1, a 60 megawatt organically cooled research reactor. Over the years, Whiteshell and WR-1 supported the development of the CANDU reactor design, and overall, Whiteshell was home to the development of several of Canada's small reactor designs, the Canadian concrete cask used fuel storage concept and design, and the Canadian spent fuel disposal concept, which is still considered the preferred concept for fuel disposal in Canada. The nearby town of Pinawa, Manitoba was built by Atomic Energy of Canada to house the workforce at the site here. And the photo you see on screen is the excavation that was made to construct the foundation for WR-1. And for scale, in the bottom or to the left side of that excavation, you can see a large heavy lift crane there. So just the extent of that excavation to construct that facility. WR-1 itself was built between 1963 and 1965, 18 months from the excavation you saw there to a critical reactor. It is a pre-CANDU prototype reactor, and it employs vertical pressure tubes and ran on low enriched uranium carbide and radium oxide fuels. It was heavy water moderated and was designed to test the concept of using an organic coolant or an oil instead of water to cool the fuel. The organic coolant allowed the reactor to operate at a lower pressure and a higher temperature, and also inhibited corrosion. However, it also required the coolant to be continually purified, as the organic liquid did break down into other more problematic hydrocarbons as a result of exposure to radiation in the reactor. In the end, the can-do concept moved forward with a heavy water coolant, but WR-1 continued to support research and development by testing various fuels, materials, and configurations over its operational period. It never produced any electric power. Its primary use was research only, though some of the heat from the reactor was used to provide building heat to some areas of the site. The WR-1 facility is an incredibly robust structure, built 5 stories below grade onto the bedrock of the Canadian Shield. It operated from 1965 to 1985, when it was safely shut down at the end of its research mission. When it was shut down, the fuel was removed and the moderator and coolant were all drained. Many of the reactor support systems were deactivated, and portions of the building were repurposed as office and training spaces. The building is now in a storage with surveillance state. The building is maintained and staffed to ensure the facility remains in a safe state. When decommissioning first began at Whiteshell over 20 years ago, the plan for WR-1 was to defer the decommissioning for approximately 60 years, at which time it was assumed that a waste disposal facility would be available that could accept the WR-1 core components. Best practice has evolved since then to reduce deferment periods and not put undue burdens on future generations to deal with the legacy nuclear liabilities. And with no centralized disposal option yet in place and none planned for approval, CNL has proposed that WR-1 now be disposed of in place or in situ. This option can be executed now with existing technologies to facilitate the closure of the Whiteshell site without putting undue burden on future generations. In situ disposal involves the demolition of the above grade structures and backfilling of the below grade structure with a highly flowable cementitious grout to encapsulate the remaining components. Now, this is not simply entombment of the reactor without thought for long-term safety. The final end state for WR-1 is a passively safe waste disposal facility that incorporates multiple barriers. There is the waste form itself. The activated reactor core contains more than 99% of the remaining radioactive inventory and is made mostly of stainless steels and zirconium alloys. These components take tens of thousands of years to corrode before they release their activation products. The core is then surrounded on all sides by a 7-foot thick, heavy concrete bioshield wall. Beyond the bioshield, the painted interior walls and floors provide another level of containment. The grout filling in the rooms, again, will provide an additional layer of isolation and containment. The exterior foundation walls are up to 1.3 meters thick at the base, and again, provide a barrier to groundwater movement and ingress. And atop the facility, an engineered cap and cupboard system will provide intrusion deterrent and infiltration resistance. Finally, the surrounding geosphere provides additional containment protection. The soils in the area have high clay content, which have a low hydraulic conductivity and will absorb many contaminants. Groundwater at the site moves very slowly downward, with an infiltration rate at site being around 0.8 millimeters per year. Groundwater moves primarily along the bedrock overburden interface and moves at a rate of about 5 meters per year horizontally. This results in a groundwater transit time of approximately 100 years from the facility to the nearby Winnipeg River. Now, CNL has proposed in situ disposal for WR-1, but must complete a federal environmental assessment before we can obtain approval to proceed. But here's a reminder of where we're at in the environmental assessment for the project. The project began in 2016 with a submission of the project description, and CNL submitted its first draft of the environmental impact statement in 2017. The first federal review by the CNSC resulted in 208 information requests. In the time that followed the first submission, CNL adjusted course and ramped up our engagement efforts with First Nations and the Manitoba Métis Federation, and took extra time to revise the environmental impact statement and respond to the 208 information requests. We resubmitted the EIS and responses to those initial information requests in 2022. In 2023, CNL received 222 new and follow-up information requests and comments. And over the last 2 years, CNL has been performing additional technical work and further advancing our collaboration with Indigenous nations while revising the EIS to address the feedback from the information requests, comments, and ongoing engagement. CNL submitted responses to all 222 comments and information requests and the revised environmental impact statement and supporting documents to the CNSC at the end of January of 2025. The revised documents and the responses to the comments and information requests are currently undergoing technical review from the Federal Provincial Indigenous Review Team. The review is expected to take approximately 120 calendar days, and CNL anticipates receiving the outcomes of that review at the end of June, beginning of July. Now, while we're going to go over the updates that CNL has made to the EIS in the next few slides, it's important to note that the EIS conclusions overall have remained the same as they were in previous submissions. The EIS examines the impacts of the project on humans and the environment, both during the construction phase and in the post-closure phase. The assessment considers current conditions, cumulative effects, and reasonably foreseeable developments. It examines both a expected normal evolution as well as unexpected but potential disruptive scenarios. It considers existing best practice, proposed mitigations, and environmental design features for the project. Based on the evaluation, even with the changes CNL has made in this submission, no significant adverse biophysical effects on human health or the environment were identified as a result of the project. Now, the photo on the right is a picture of one of our staff members preparing for a bat exit survey we did in 2023, and that's where we watch and listen for bats that may be roosting or hibernating in the structures surrounding WR-1. The EIS package itself contains a large number of documents, and the image on screen here shows the relative hierarchy of the technical documents CNL has produced as part of the regulatory processes, both from the environmental assessment side, as well as to support CNL's application for a license amendment. The EIS package is headlined by the EIS itself. The decommissioning safety assessment is the primary technical supporting document for the EIS and provides the bulk of the technical analysis summary. And these are both underpinned by a suite of technical supporting documents. These include groundwater flow and solute transport modeling reports, the environmental risk assessment report, and other technical studies performed by CNL and its contractors, as well as over 700 individual technical reference documents to support all of these assessments. Well, now we'll get into an overview of the specific changes that were made to the EIS and the supporting documents for this most recent submission. CNL has made major changes to 3 documents: the EIS, the Environmental Risk Assessment, and the Indigenous Engagement Report. As a result of information requests from the Federal Provincial Indigenous Review Team, as well as extensive ongoing engagements with First Nations and the Manitoba Métis Federation. We also made minor changes in the Public Engagement Report to include note of recent events. No other documents in the technical submission were revised, as there were no other information requests associated with them that required changes. Now, some of the overall changes that you'll see throughout the EIS include the incorporation of feedback and perspectives of Indigenous nations, communities, and organizations. We've updated the project schedule forecast. We've updated references, for example, revisions to our either internal documents or external documents or standards that have been revised since our last submission. We made general edits to terminology, figures, and tables throughout to ensure that things still line up. And we've updated the language on how we refer to Indigenous peoples according to the feedback that we received from Indigenous nations on how they choose to be referred to. Again, all of the changes made were driven by responses to information requests from the Federal Review Team and through discussions with and commitments made to the Indigenous communities. In the photo here on the right, this is us giving a tour of the WR-1 control room. Okay, so section 4 of the EIS covers Indigenous engagement, and all of the changes we made to our Indigenous engagement report are reflected here. In section 5, public engagement, that's where updates to our public engagement activities were reflected in the EIS. Section 6.2 of the EIS is the atmospheric environment, and this now reflects updates that were made to our air quality modeling, sorry. Section 6.32 on the hydrogeologic environment, that reflects additional technical work that was done in groundwater flow and transport modeling. Section 6.7 on human and ecological health, this is where environmental risk assessment updates were reflected. And section 6.8, traditional land and resource use, reflects the improved description of the Indigenous traditional lands and resource use. And again, the photo here on the right, this is our Indigenous relations team out participating in one of our community events. Now, specifically on Indigenous engagement, section 4 addresses a lot of the updates from information requests and engagement activities up until July of 2024. Those main updates include just summarizing the list of engagements that we've had with First Nations and the MMF, the status of any agreements or programs that have been established, including the Nagan-Aki Community Environmental Monitoring Program led by Saginaw First Nation, any new avenues of cooperation that we've had with any of the Indigenous communities, including on environmental monitoring, articulation or update of progress or evolution of each interest and concern that communities have had, the incorporation of any commitments that we've made to each community specific to the interests and concerns they have on the project. And all of these updates to the EIS are aligned with updates that were made to the Indigenous Engagement Report. Here on the right is a photo of our staff along with representatives from the Nagan-Aki program and Black River and Hollow Water First Nations on site doing mushroom picking as part of our environmental monitoring program. Section 5 of the EIS, public engagement, addresses updates from the information requests and engagement activities, again, up until July of 2024. And the main updates really just include update on the record of events between December of 2022 and July of 2024. And these updates have been aligned with the updates to the public engagement report. Photos here of our presentations to the Geoscientists Canada, the LGD of Pinawa, and the regional gathering of all municipalities, Indigenous nations, and school divisions in our region. We updated the assessment of air quality to compare to new 2025 air quality criteria and added data from 3 additional air quality monitoring stations that were more representative of a rural, non-industrial setting, such as the Whiteshell Laboratories area. We completed revised dispersion modeling to look at the impacts of the project on air quality, both on site, but also now beyond the site boundaries. And we committed to requiring that vehicles on our site will meet Tier 4 emission standards for the work. Overall, again, the changes to the modeling in the EIS did not change the conclusion that there would be no significant residual adverse effects on air quality as a result of the project. The photo here on the right is an example of another example of our collaboration with First Nations. Here they were doing annual blueberry picking with Black River and Hollow Water First Nation representatives. Section 6.3.2, the hydrogeology section. So here we address updates related to, there were comments and information requests on the uncertainty of results of groundwater flow and transport modeling. So we had formed additional work to evaluate 11 new sensitivity scenarios. These look at the impacts of fractured flow pathways potentially existing between WR-1 and the river. And the results of these cases were carried forward to the environmental risk assessment to discuss how these hypothetical scenarios would potentially impact doses to the public and the environment. The photo shown here is a diagram of the revised model scenario showing flow through a network of 5 potential fractures in the bedrock. Now, the environmental risk assessment was also updated in response to the ERAs as the information requests, as well as to incorporate the outcomes of the updated groundwater flow modeling. So the ERA is a supporting document that directly feeds into the EIS and provides the overall assessment of dose and exposure to humans in the environment from the project. Changes to this ERA are also reflected in section 6.7, and those the two documents are aligned. The main updates to the ERA and to Section 6.7 included the assessment of uranium as a chemical element, not just as a radiological element. We updated the water screening to use the latest 2024 Health Canada drinking water quality guidelines. We updated the harvester model to include pathways, both internal and external, for sediment exposure. We updated the explanation of the human intrusion scenario for its applicability as to a future resident receptor. We updated the human toxicological reference values, or the TRVs, for cadmium and lead to the most recent recommended from Health Canada. And we recalculated all the hazard quotients for all scenarios. The hazard quotients exceedances remained the same, with the addition of the exceedance of the harvester for lead ingestion. And that, again, as with the previous hazard quotients in previous versions of the EIS, was because of background concentrations, not because of contributions to the project, from the project. We added a new appendix to the ERA comparing the traditional foods diet for both the Manitoba Métis Federation and the Saugeen First Nations values against those used in our harvester receptor model to ensure that the values used in the model were most conservative. We also added an uncertainty discussion using the results of those additional groundwater sensitivity scenarios that we noted in the hydrogeology section above. Again, overall, the conclusions and recommendations of the EIS remained unchanged, and that there would not be any significant residual adverse effects on humans or the environment as a result of the project. In Section 6.8.1 on traditional land and resource use, changes here were based on discussions with First Nations and the Manitoba Métis Federation, and include updates to historic and present-day traditional land use to include information provided by those nations. We updated the status of the contribution agreements, as well as in other sections of the document were relevant. And the monitoring and follow-up section was updated to reflect CNL's commitment to augment our environmental assessment follow-up monitoring program based on the interests and feedback received from Indigenous nations. Now, the photo on the right here is from a milkweed walk down with the Naganaki program and representatives from Black River and Hollow Water First Nation in the summer of 2024. Now that wraps up the high-level changes to the EIS that were made for this revision. And at this point, I think we're quite happy to take any questions you may have on what's going on with our submission this year.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Great presentation. We will get to some questions here. So a reminder that you can use the Q&A function to type in your questions, and we will read them out. Okay, first one. Will this project require a licensing change for Whiteshell?
So the answer is yes. As I mentioned earlier, there's kind of two processes that the project has to follow. First is a federal environmental assessment. The second is an amendment to our license through the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, but CNSC being the authority having jurisdiction for both. So we complete the EIS to satisfy the requirements of the environmental assessment. We also complete additional documentation, including a detailed decommissioning plan and a safety case report that would support our licensing amendment application, which would only move forward if the environmental assessment is approved.
Okay, great, thank you. How long would decommissioning take if the project is approved?
So right now we have a kind of a bare bones projected schedule. The exact decommissioning time would be in the future be based on start time, if we get permission to start in the winter, start in the summer, and how construction seasons align, but also based on market conditions when we go to start hiring contractors to start executing some of the work. Tentatively, though, we're looking at a period of 3 to 4 years, but certainly that'll be refined as we get closer to and make further progress on detailed execution planning and contract strategy planning once the project is approved.
All right, thank you. Is the updated EIS publicly available?
Yes, the updated EIS revision number 5 is available on the Impact Assessment Agency website for the project. If you Google WR-1 EIS Rev 5, it should be the first or second results, so it should be very easy to find.
Okay, great. Guessing you answered the question. I was busy sneezing, sorry. But um, would the non-radioactive waste be disposed of at the site as well?
So yes, to an extent, there are non-radioactive waste present in the building, things like residual organic coolant, asbestos insulation, um, uh, that currently are in the building that we have accounted for in the environmental impact statement and our assessment. There are certain things like PCBs and PCB containing materials that are excluded from that, where the plan as laid out in the EIS would be to remove those any of those wastes ahead of time. But the plan and the assessment does include the disposal of non-radioactive waste within the same in situ facility.
Okay, great. Thank you. Um, what is the plan if the CNSC does not allow in situ?
So that one's a little more difficult to answer, especially at my level. If CNSC rejects in situ decommissioning, it would depend on the reason for the rejection. It would depend on any strategic input that CNL would receive from AECL as the owner of the site, as well as any existing policy that's in place from the Government of Canada, including National Waste Strategy, if that were the case at that time.
Okay, thank you. Has similar work been carried out by, has similar work to this been carried out by CNL before?
Um, not at not in the not in modern times. So the waste management at CNL and AECL has evolved over the years. It has gone from placing waste in the ground and to a point here now where we're retrieving some of that waste to handle it differently. None of that was ever done under a federal environmental assessment with the long-term safety analysis that's being done here. We are not doing things now the way it was done previously. We are constructing a waste disposal facility with long-term safety in mind, and this is the first time this has been done for a reactor in Canada. We are pursuing a parallel path with the NPD reactor, so it's not to say that they have done this before us, but we are pursuing this approach for 2 reactors at the same time at CNL. WR-1 here, as well as the NPD reactor in Ralston, Ontario.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just seeing if there are any more questions. We'll wait a few moments to see if any more come in. Just know that if we don't get to your question or it comes in late and we get it, we will add that to our email response when we send the YouTube links of the recording. Okay, so like I did in the last webinar, to avoid awkward silence, we will start our exit of the webinar. So thank you for attending the webinar today. Before wrapping up, I'd like to encourage everyone to please take the time to complete our follow-up survey that we'll be sending out shortly. We'll send out the links of today's session once it's posted on YouTube, and feel free to distribute it to anyone that might be interested. So if, like I said, if there's any late questions, we'll get the responses in with those links as well. If you have any questions that you think of later on, you could always email us at wlcommunications@cnl.ca. Jeff, great presentation. Thanks for answering all those questions. Oh, there. You know what? Let's do a couple more. There are some that came in. Just let me. What kind of collaborative measures will be taken with other Whiteshell departments for this project?
It's a bit of a broad question, and I hope I can answer it to your satisfaction. So all of the projects, specifically at Whiteshell, are all well integrated. Both my project With WR-1, we have projects to remediate waste out of our waste management area. We have projects to design equipment for retrieving waste, more problematic waste, also out of the waste management area. We do maintain a level of connection on all of these. We have shared resources. We follow the same procedures, and we share information through lessons learned on individual jobs that are executed. So whenever work is done on a project at any level, generally those are followed by a lessons learned meeting, which documents the things that went well, things that didn't go as well, or things that could be done better. And those lessons learned are circulated and made available to all the other projects on site, so that we can continuously improve on the way we execute work here at site and collaborate on in the areas where we have common challenges.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. The next question is about the state of the entire Whiteshell site. So I will get one of my team members to link our web page, our Whiteshell decommissioning web page. Lots going on at the rest of the site. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to add in, but yeah, the WR1 and the Whiteshell projects happen kind of simultaneously, and there's lots going on at the Whiteshell project. We'll link to you.
I think you covered it well, Mike.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. Okay. So again, Jeff, great presentation. Thanks for answering all those questions. Reach out to us, Whiteshell Communications or WL Communications at cno.ca if you think of anything else. Thank you, and have a good day.